Chicago, 1947. A man is standing outside a bathroom door. His job, his only job, for the next 3 hours is to make sure nobody goes in. No one flushes. No one opens the door. No one even knocks. Inside, a speaker is playing music into a tiled room on the 42nd floor of an opera house. And a microphone is listening to what comes back. Nobody had ever done this before. And the sound that came out of that bathroom is still inside every record you've ever loved. Before we get to the bathroom, you need to understand the problem. For the first 50 years of recorded music, what you heard was what was there. If a singer performed in a dry, dead room, the record sounded dry and dead. If they performed in a cathedral, it sounded like a cathedral. Engineers had no control over space. They had no way to add it, remove it, or shape it. The room was the sound, and the sound was the room. And that mattered more than you might think. Human beings are wired to trust space. A voice that comes from nowhere, no room, no air, no echo, doesn't sound real. It sounds like a telephone, like a ghost, like something is wrong, even if you can't name what. The great concert halls of the world had spent centuries learning this. The curve of a ceiling, the angle of a wall, the distance between surfaces, all of it calculated to wrap sound around a listener and make them feel like they were inside something larger than themselves. Recorded music had none of that. By the mid-1940s, a handful of engineers were starting to understand the gap, but none of them had solved it. Then there was Bill Putnam. Bill Putnam was 27 years old in 1947. He had grown up in central Illinois building radios in his bedroom. By high school, he was repairing them for money. By the time America entered the war, he was engineering radio systems for the Army Corps of Engineers in Chicago, and later working for military intelligence, developing a miniaturized gun detector used by the Secret Service to protect Franklin Roosevelt. He was, in other words, not the kind of person who accepted that something couldn't be done simply because it hadn't been done yet. In 1946, he founded Universal Recording Corporation, one of the first independent studios in America, not tied to any label, free to experiment with whoever walked through the door. A year later, he moved it into the 42nd floor of the Chicago Civic Opera Building, a recording studio inside an opera house. There's a poetry to that. And it was there, in 1947, that 3 harmonica players came to record a song. The Harmonicats were not famous. They were a trio, Jerry Murad, Don Les, and Al Fiore, who played harmonica arrangements of popular songs. Not exactly the cutting edge of post-war American music. The song they wanted to record was called Peg o' My Heart, a ballad that had been written in 1913. It had been recorded dozens of times already. There was no obvious reason this version would be different from any other. But Putnam had been thinking about space. He understood, in a way most engineers of his era didn't, that the problem wasn't just technical, it was perceptual. Listeners didn't want to hear a recording. They wanted to feel like they were somewhere. And the recording had to create that feeling artificially, because the studio itself was designed to kill it. Studios were built to be acoustically dead. Flat walls, soft surfaces, no reflections. That was considered good practice. Control the sound, eliminate the variables. The problem was that eliminate the variables also eliminated the thing that made music feel alive. Putnam needed a room that was the opposite of a studio. Hard surfaces, parallel walls, tiles. He walked down the hall to the bathroom. He carried a speaker inside and set it up. He ran a cable back to the session room and connected it to the mixing desk. Then he placed a microphone on the other side of the bathroom, close enough to catch the reflections off the walls, far enough to let the sound develop. And he stationed someone at the door. Nobody flushes, nobody comes in. We're recording. The logic was simple once you saw it. Play the dry signal through the speaker into the bathroom. Let the room do what rooms do. Let the sound bounce off the tiles, multiply, decay. Capture that with the microphone. Blend it back into the original recording. Artificial space. created from a bathroom on the 42nd floor of an opera house in Chicago. When the Harmonicats played that day and Putnam blended the two signals together, the dry recording and the wet ghost of it coming back from the tiles, something happened that no one in that room had heard before. The music breathed. It sounded like it existed somewhere. Not a stage, not a cathedral, not any place you could name, but somewhere. A space that didn't exist except on that recording. An engineer named Bruce Swedien, who worked with Putnam later in his career, described what Putnam understood that others didn't. The processes and designs which we take for granted, the design of modern recording desks, the way components are laid out and the way they function, they all originated in Bill's imagination. But on that afternoon in 1947, none of that existed yet. There was just a bathroom, a speaker, a microphone, and a man at the door making sure nobody flushed. Peg of My Heart by the Harmonicats sold 1.4 million copies. For a trio of harmonica players recording a 30-year-old ballad in an independent studio in Chicago, that number was absurd. It went to #1 on the Billboard chart and stayed there. Nobody could entirely explain why. The melody was familiar. The arrangement was simple. The performance was charming but not revolutionary. What was different was the sound, that impossible, shimmering quality, the sense that the music was coming from inside a space that was larger than any room you were actually sitting in. Listeners had never heard anything like it, and they responded to it the way human beings respond to anything that makes them feel like they're somewhere else entirely. The industry noticed. Within a few years, major studios across America started building dedicated echo chambers, rooms designed from the ground up to do what Putnam's bathroom had done by accident. Sunset Sound in Los Angeles, Capitol Records, Motown, Abbey Road in London installed its own chambers, and they became central to the sound of the 1960s. The Beatles recorded through them. Pink Floyd recorded through them. Every major recording of that era carries the fingerprint of what Bill Putnam figured out in a bathroom. And then technology caught up. In 1957, the first plate reverb arrived, a large sheet of aluminum suspended in a box, vibrated by a transducer, that could simulate a room without needing one. By the 1980s, digital reverb units could model any space imaginable, a concert hall, a cave, a cathedral, from a box the size of a paperback book. Today, a reverb plugin costs less than a cup of coffee and takes 2 seconds to install. Every one of them is a direct descendant of what happened on the 42nd floor of the Chicago Civic Opera Building in 1947. Here is what I keep coming back to. The bathroom wasn't a laboratory. It wasn't a prototype. It wasn't the result of years of research and development. It was a bathroom, with tiles, on a floor nobody else was using. Bill Putnam walked down a hallway and looked at a room that everyone else walked past every day and thought, what if we listen to what this room does? That question, not the equipment, not the budget, not the pedigree, is what changed everything. The reverb you hear on your favorite record, the shimmer on that vocal, the way a kick drum seems to fill a space larger than any room you could fit it in. All of it traces back to a moment when someone decided to pay attention to something everyone else was ignoring. The sound of music, as we know it, was invented in a bathroom, and someone had to stand at the door to make it happen.